Hey, HTDA, and today we're playing the demo of Primordial Empire, and if you're anything like me, you'll watch about 2 minutes of this gameplay and then you're just going to download the demo and play it for yourself, so you are warned. We're going to be developing basically a base of microbes. We're going to be harvesting resources, we're going to be growing stem cells, we're going to be planting plants and then have the microbes transport things from A to B, all of that stuff. In terms of the setup, it's actually pretty straightforward, but in terms of the gameplay, it is super addictive, and honestly, I just love the Zen feel of this game. Everything about this game makes me want to play it more, as well as just relax and look at what is happening on the screen. You can see these microbes floating around. These are the kind of like our units, you could say. We're not going to be fighting anything as far as I am aware. It's basically a factory game, but in a microbial world which is really dynamic and everything is like moving around and stuff. So let's get to it. Let me quickly walk you through what you're looking at on the screen. So on the top left we have our resources. As you can see, we are currently capped out on plasma, for example, but we're producing an amount of 7. And we have different types of those resources that we'll get to later on. Basically, the further you get, the more complex resources you will need to gather, obviously, and those will be harder and harder to actually collect. These are kind of like our quests that we need to complete in order to process through the game. On the top right, we have a little bit of speed control, so you can actually speed up the game, which is a nice feature, I think, in general to have. We can use a couple of commands over here. We can recycle. This is basically just destroying buildings, or I would say plants and creatures that you might want to replace with something else. We have food rations we can use to kind of like boost our stem cells. You can see the stem cells floating around over here. We can use the attractive pheromones to kind of like guide where our stem cells are supposed to go, because we can't directly control them, but we can kind of guide them. And on the reverse of that, we can say, well, we don't want you to go here, so I can kind of block this with these commands as well. Now, as you can see, the stem cells are actually what we use to explore. So if I want anyone to go here, I can say, okay, hey, you go and kind of discover what's over here, and you can kind of guide them, but I can't get too far away from my home base. So there's a limit to how far we can go without expanding. Then on the bottom over here, we have everything we can build. So advanced production that will of course unlock later on, some technology trees and things like that. But that is about it. So it's a pretty straightforward game, but still it is a lot more complicated than it might seem at first glance. So first things first, we are going to want to make sure we get more of these stem cells, because these are kind of like our basic worker units. In order to do that, we're going to plant some micro agaves. Now these are going to dispense food particles, which is what the stem cells eat. These things need to be either on fertile ground and light, or they need to be in range of a feeder cell, because that will allow them to eat basically the feeder cells instead. Now, feeder cells eat our stem cells, so you can kind of see the whole food circle already happening there. Feeder agaves make sure the stem cells have something to eat. The feeder cells make sure that the agaves have something to eat, but the feeders will eat the stem cells. So you have kind of like this whole circle of life thing happening over here. Luckily, we do have some light source over here. This is our kind of like our main base, some fertile ground as well. So what we can do is just place down a whole bunch of these little plants, and as you can see, they start really small, but then these stem cells are going to actually transform into these plants, and they will slowly start building. But as you can see, this one is probably just out of range of our light, so it might wither and die. I'll just leave it there so you can actually see what is happening. But what I really, really love about this game is that these plants slowly start growing and expanding, and there is a very kind of natural vibe to this game. I mean, just by the setting, of course, but it's really well done as you're expanding your base as well. Okay, so as we click on this agave where the warning is, you can see that it is outside of the light. So we're not building it close enough to actually benefit from the light of this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place one down on the opposite side. Let's make sure it's as close as possible. I do want to leave a little bit of space just in case we need it for something else. But yeah, this plant is going to wither and die. So we might as well recycle it. We can do it like that. And then we get some of those resources back and kind of put that back into the system. But you can see that there's these little blobs spitting out of these agaves. and the stem cells are rushing there to eat those, and they will start multiplying as a result of that as well. In order to expand our base, we're going to need these vesicle, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but these hubs basically. These are transportation stations that will increase the range of our base, because as you can see, our current starting base has a limited range. Some of these resources are already kind of like outside of its reach. But if I build some of these hubs, and I do need to make sure that they're actually in line of sight of my initial base, I can use these to expand my territory. And these are going to be all over the place, and we're going to use them to transport not just the stem cells from A to B, but also our resources back to our home base. Now, as you can see, it might take a little while for these stem cells to actually realize that there's something to build here, so that's where those pheromones can come in and kind of speed things up if you need them to. But yeah, it plops out, and now we have a physical hub over here. You can already see that these vesicles are spawning new units that are going out and collecting some of the resources that are floating around the map. So this is how we get our base building blocks to build more advanced stuff. Last but not least, everything has an upkeep. So for example, the hub over here does cost me some plasma per minute. You can see that I'm still producing a surplus of plasma because the plasma is being produced by the cells. But if I would just spam these hubs all over the place, I could like go across and explore, but I would soon run out of plasma and everything would start dying. So there's a balance to keep in mind when you're expanding your empire. Next on the list is a protein incubator. This is going to require once again fertile soil, but this plant actually needs to be in the darkness. It's going to be producing protein, but it again has a plasma upkeep, so I don't want to spam them all over the place. You can see, for example, we have some fertile ground over here. I might be able to fit it in over here, considering this was a dark place where my agave wouldn't grow. So hopefully this means that this plant will do the trick over here. Let's check if it meets all the requirements. Yeah, it has the fertile ground. It is in darkness, so it's working like intended. So now we are going to be producing a little bit of protein over. Well, it takes a moment for the plant to actually start growing and start producing, but we should see that flowing in pretty soon. I'm actually going to build one on the outside of the fertile soil over here as well. I should probably build them here. That's probably an intended place, but we might as well start optimizing our base from the get-go, because we do have limited space, we do have limited resources, so you do want to play smart. As you can see, we now have some protein production up and running, which means I can start working on a feeder hub that is going to consume some of the protein, but it will allow me to build in darkness as well. Or at least, for example, some of these micro agave plants that require fertile soil could also grow anywhere else, as long as I have enough feeders to supply them. Now, where am I going to place this is the real question. Let's see. You can see the requirements. It needs protein in order to be able to reach that, so it needs to be in the range of one of these hubs, so the hub can actually transport protein to it. So I might as well just place it right over here, or maybe I should actually place it next to a hub. That might make a little bit more sense, because that will require less transportation all around the place. You can see the units over here, I'm not sure what they're called, but the vesicles, I guess, vesicles, are grabbing the protein from these plants and they're bringing it back to this thing where it's being stored, and then they can transport it to my new feeder over here. When it comes to some of these more tough resources that need to be broken down, there's a couple of different ways in which you can collect them. As the game is already suggesting to me, you can do that with a mineral extractor. That sounds like a machine, but it's actually a plant that uses its roots to grab those minerals and produce them. Now, this plant requires feeder cells, so it's a good thing we just built one of those. And for example, I can place it over here on this mineral patch that you can see over here. So that should start growing pretty soon. Now, these larger resource nodes can actually be taken down by grubbers. These are tiny little creatures that will just burrow into those resources, break them down, so you have these things floating around that you can see over here. And we can get access to those minerals as well as these nutrients by means of like little creatures doing that for us. So the way this works, you can just see this cell over here feeding this plant. It's now a very happy plant, as you can see. It's really funny how this works. It will generate some food. It's a food that will tick down slowly as the extractor consumes it. And whenever it gets too low, one of the feeder cells will jump right back to it and feed it once more. Now, you do want to make sure that you don't produce too many of these feeder cells, because then you will run out of stem cells, but you do want to have enough to actually feed your plants. So again, it's a nice little balance thing happening. With this initial setup of the base done, we are now moving on to the second set of quests. So as you can see, we need to grow the colony to 30 biomass. Biomass is something you get by basically just expanding your colony, making sure you have different types of creatures, different types of plants, and the more you have, the more health points you have, for example, the more biomass points you get. So we're about halfway through this quest already. But yeah, we are definitely going to need to expand. At the same time, we also need to create a plus 15 protein balance, which means we want to have a lot more of those protein incubators, which again need to be on fertile soil, in the darkness, or being fed by feeder hubs. So that's a little bit of a puzzle there to figure out how we can do this best. I think a pretty good start is probably to use the space in the light we have available over here to build some more of the agaves. And then we're also going to want some more of the other ones. These are over here. Let's place those over here. How many can we fit in? 3 of them, maybe? Yeah, that should take us a little bit closer to the biomass. You can see it going up and down as some of my creatures are being consumed. It drops down. Once I build more stuff, it goes up. You do want to make sure you keep balancing this thing, but it is very zen. You're not being attacked or anything like that. It's a pretty relaxing game. Now, I also want to add another one of these grubbers, because I want to start making some of this stuff over here. Now, why am I getting a warning over here? I'm probably going to need to be in the range of a hub. Yeah. So if I place it over here, these grubbers can actually reach both of these locations. That should be just fine. I also want another one of these hubs on this side, so we can see if there's something more to explore over here. We're kind of building our own little network of stuff. So let's put our little creatures to work. We can actually assign them to different locations. So I'm gonna have 2 of these grubbers mine this nutrient to get some more proteins, and then one of them is going to take care of these minerals over here. You can see them spawning over here. They seem to be kind of stuck. Or are they just spawning? I'm not entirely sure what's happening with them, but hopefully they will figure it out. Yeah, there they go. They're off to the races. They are going to break this down. They are going to make sure this is all cut to pieces, so my other hubs can go and collect these resources. As you can see, they're kind of drawing it into the cell. It's so awesome. I'm really loving how this game works, and transporting it back to the hub. Now, the nice thing about building these hubs is that the stem cells will automatically go and explore a little bit for you. So, for example, we have some crustacean remains over here that we, again, can harvest with my grubbers. There seems to be some light coming through here as well, so that's interesting if we want to make some more of these agaves. We don't have the fertile soil as far as I can tell, though, but, you know, it's something we might be able to work with. There is some things going on over here as well. Let's see if we can get some pheromones going, maybe like this, just in line of sight. Yeah, that works. I don't think we're going to get very far with this hub over here. Might have to relocate maybe that to this location here. Not entirely sure, but let's find out. It is worth noting that once I built these hubs, my initial plasma production dropped down a lot, because these things are consumed. The hubs do consume a lot of plasma, but as my stem cell count is growing up again, as you can see, I'm now again in the positive. So we are producing a little bit of everything at the moment. We have a surplus production. Let's see where we can take this next. So I think this is a much smarter location for my hub. It is still in the reach of the main base, but now I can go up, down, wherever I want, and maybe go towards the light. Oh, and as a side note, you might be wondering why I don't just delete these small plants that you see growing out here, but these are actually wild agaves that do produce food. They do it very slowly, but this is one of the reasons that my stem cells do kind of explore all over the place, because they want that food, so there's no really any reason to rip these out unless we need the building space. Would you look at this? Up top on here is a lot of light and a lot of fertile ground, so I'm going to plant a lot more of these agaves. I don't think there's a downside to planting these. Let's see. They have an upkeep of fertile ground and light, but yeah, that's infinite, so I can pretty much just spam these all over the place. Nope, can't fit another one in there. This just means we're going to get a lot of these plasma injections over here, a lot of the stem cells being bred over here as well. So that should make for a pretty nice and fertile feeding ground. Now we're increasing our production. It actually makes sense to build a couple of these pots as well. They store additional resources, so I can actually get more of them in my inventory, and that will also help me build more complex things later on. So let's start with a plasma pot or two. They do need to be next to one of these hubs. Can I fit one of those in here as well? Apparently not. That's a little inconvenient. Well, I might as well just place one of them down here then, maybe like that. That will double the amount of plasma I can store. My plasma production should go up quite a bit. Now I have all of these food resources over here, because these stem cells are going to go and feast on these like insanely much, and hopefully we'll soon have several dozen of them floating around. Similarly, we also have protein pods. Now, these actually don't need to be next to a hub. They just need to be in the light, and they will allow me to store more protein. So, I guess I could place a couple of those down here. They shoot me in the light, and that will help me get a lot more resources up and running as well. And then if we want to store more minerals, we're going to need a mineral pod. Now, these actually have an upkeep for feeder cells, so I'm going to have to place them somewhere close to the actual mineral production, which makes sense. So these feeders can get both the feeding of the mineral extractor itself going, as well as some storage. There we go, look at all that life. It's really satisfying just to look at it rather than just play it. But yeah, let's see. We need some more protein for the secondary objective. And for that we need some more incubators. Now over here, you can see this is not actually in the light, so I can't place agaves here. But I should be able to place quite a few of these incubators. There we go. I might actually see, can I place some of these? Yeah, they are in the light over here. So that means that we'll actually get some of these stem cells growing here as well. Making sure there are stem cells all over the place and makes your life a lot easier, because you do need them to create buildings and things like that. So all in all, this should work pretty well. I wonder what's going on over here. There seems to be some sort of, I don't know, bubbles in the air. Let's see if that actually works. Let's see if the pheromone works. Yep. I did distract my stem cells from actually building things, but all in all, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. I wonder what's going on here. Just a tiny time skip over here. I cleaned out the grubbers because they cleared out all the resources, so that I no longer needed them, and I built an enzyme distillery over here. It just needs light, and it consumes some of those proteins that we're producing over here in order to make enzymes. Now, this is a strategic resource which we need to build special buildings. For example, I can use these enzymes to make berry grass. This is going to produce food that the feeders can eat. So these are the feeders that normally feed on my stem cells. And you don't need anything other than either enzymes, protein, or plasma to keep these alive. So you don't need light, you don't need stem cells, nothing like that. You can just place these, for example, in the middle of nowhere over here. Assuming you have a hub to supply them with something. And that means that I can place, for example, a feeder hub next to that. And then this feeder hub will be able, assuming I place it again somewhere it can reach, this feeder hub will be able to feed, let's say, a grubber burrow. I'm gonna need one of these vesicle hubs to supply as well. It can fit right next to there. And then if I build the rubber hub over here, that should allow me to mine all of these resources. Now, I do need to make sure I can get some of these stem cells over here. So let's make it more interesting for them to get here. Let's have maybe a couple of them, like 6 of them. If I use shift, I can actually set some waypoints and guide a whole bunch of them to this general direction. And I have plenty of them over here. So now some of them will make the track, you can see them moving already, to here, and start building some of these plants. Oh, look at that. In the corner over here, which is actually connected to the area I was just looking at before, there are some DNA particles, as well as a fossilized ember, which has a lot of that DNA as well. So we're going to want to farm that as well. Let's see, can the grubber... No, of course not. Can't actually reach over there. Let's make sure we have plenty of these feeders, and I'm gonna make another one of these grubbers And I'll just place it maybe over here so it can work on both these areas. And then we should be able to mine some DNA. What else do we have? We have the carnivorous protein factory, which I just placed over here. This is going to produce protein similarly as these protein incubators, but this is actually a carnivorous plant, so it's going to eat some of my stem cells, but it can also eat berries, apparently. Not entirely sure how that works, but it works. Why are you shouting at me? I have some berry grass over here, but it can't find any protein. But the protein is like right next to you. Maybe I should build another hub. Maybe that helps to kind of like get the flow of all of this going a little bit better. I'm just upgrading all of these hubs to the max, so we have as many of those like transportation cells going around. Not entirely sure if that's going to solve anything, but at least the warning just disappeared, so it definitely does something. Now, at this point, this is the demo, remember, so there's probably going to be more complicated levels after this, but look at this, it looks beautiful. And right now, our main goal is just to get more biodiversity going, as much biomass and complexity as we can. How do we get complexity? Some of the neural processing power. Oh, we're going to get smart, are we? Each connection between two neurons, earns one complexity point, and we get bonus points if we have a chain of them. Okay, well, let's see how we do that. Looks like all we need to do in order to do that is build neurons, and these plants are relatively expensive because I do need DNA to produce them, but other than that, they only require an upkeep of plasma. So I have like a lot of open space over here, so that might be a nice location to build it, maybe over here. But I don't really have a way of getting a lot of this DNA going, so let's see how we do that. Well, I could build a genetic sampler, but that needs a resource that I don't currently have. So I think that's actually the biomass. We need 100 biomass before I can build a genetic sampler. So yeah, we're just going to basically expand our base, build some more complex structures, have some more biodiversity going on, and then we can start generating some real DNA. I'm going to draw some more of those stem cells from over here and set up a little bit more of my crystal production, because as you can see, I'm running a little bit low on that. I'm not running low on crystal itself, but I need to clear out these larger crystals so I can set up some of these plants to auto-mine it instead. In order to do that, I need some more of these grubbers. One of them actually got taken out, so that's nice, but yeah, the grubbers can be expanded a little bit further, I think. And at this point, the game kind of turns into a puzzle because I have pretty limited space. As you can see, it's not a massive map, and in order to get 100 biomass going on that, we do need to kind of optimize all of these workflows, production spaces, and things like that. Now, I did discover that I do have a lot more crystal over here, so I should be able to fit in a couple more of these plants and mine out this crystal as well. So the next thing I've built is this lancet hive. Now, this creates, I don't know, small little fish, I guess, and we can use those fish to cut out some of the old plants. Now, you don't want to cut out all these plants because some of them are actually useful, but these plants, for example, are on fertile ground, they're kind of in the way, and I'd rather have actual agaves there than the current, like, inferior versions of those instead. And I am going to actually need to clear out these plants because, as you can see, I'm running way too low on plasma. I actually had a plant here starve, so you can definitely not just keep expanding willy-nilly. You do need to think about what you're doing, and I'm a little bit ahead of myself there. So let's fill in this little open space with as many of these agave plants as I can fit in, so hopefully I can get some more stem cells going. Look at this beautiful plant. That is a toxin harvester, which we can use to get poison going, and poison is another strategic resource. Now, the interesting thing is this thing is actually using its own poison as upkeep, so I'm not entirely sure how that is supposed to work, but I assume it's producing more toxin than it actually needs for its upkeep. That does mean that we have another strategic resource that we can use, and let's see, we can use that, I think, to build lumen flora. This allows us to produce light pretty much anywhere. And this is kind of awesome because that means, for example, in this kind of like barren area over here where nothing right now is happening, I can build one of these things and then we should get some light going. Actually, maybe we can use it to light up this area and put some agaves in here rather than just produce a lot of protein. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to work, but it's worth finding out. Speaking of stem cells, by the way, well, that's what I use the agaves for. I also have a stem cell sprouter here. This is using protein and minerals in order to just spawn stem cells without requiring any food, which is definitely useful if you want to just, well, build something somewhere but you can't really get your stem cells there. Because remember, even if I just like have my stem cells float over there, if they don't get enough food, they actually die along the way. So barren areas like this, well, there's a lot of food here now because I destroyed some buildings, but generally speaking, it can actually be pretty hard to expand a long distance if you don't have enough food along the way. And look at this, there was a lot of food already stacked up, but so as soon as I brought in all the stem cells, they started multiplying like crazy. So we kind of have like a breeding ground over here, just like I intended. It's kind of awesome, because we made that. There was no light in here before, we put the light in there, we put the plants in there, and now they're thriving. Well, I passed the 100 biomass, and that means it's time for a genetic sampler. This thing is scanning everything around it and producing DNA in the process. In the meanwhile, look at my little brain developing over here. These are all these neurons that are kind of linked together. I am already at 42 complexity, so well on my way to getting the first star for the 100 biomass and 100 complexity. But yeah, I am going to have to do some more expanding still. And this about covers the demo. Well, I've built myself quite the nice aquarium, as you can see, with a lot of these creatures all floating around, and this is just the start of the game. Remember, there's a whole development tree, infrastructure, etc. that's pretty much empty at the moment, but I imagine that in the full game there's going to be a lot more to follow after this. So I'm actually really looking forward to this. Look it up on Steam, I'll leave a link in the description as always, and if you want to play this game as well, then make sure you wishlist it, because that does help the developer out. For now, if you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.